Okay, very good day to Miss Kathy and also fellow friends. We are a group of five members here. First, I would like to introduce all my group members. First, me, myself, Priya Lushni, followed by John Matthew, Lunesh, Valerie, and also Yogaraj. The topic that we have chosen to do our project is personality factors that actually affects the acquisition and also the learning of second language, and the relevance of ESL in the classroom. Before we moving on to the personality factors, let me explain the difference between acquisition and also learning. So when you acquire a language, you acquire the meaning of the language. But when we learn a language, we learn both the form and also the meaning of the language. For example, if we take English as an example, right, as a second language, when you acquire a language, you just uh, you just learn the form of the language. But when you learn the language itself, you learn the form, which consists of the parts of speech, which consists of the vocabulary, the grammar, and also the meaning of the language as well. So now let us look into the personality factors. First will be intelligence and also the brain. The brain itself consists of two different parts. The first part will be the left hemisphere and second part will be the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is actually responsible for the language acquisition. So we will be focusing on the left hemisphere that helps in acquiring the second language. So the parts of brain which is responsible for the acquisition and also learning and also the development of language is Broca's area, which are located in the left side and which is responsible for the speech production and also articulation. And the second part is Wernicke's part area, which is associated with language development and comprehension. So these personality factors, the intelligence and also the brain, is more into science fiction side. And when we look into the research, students who acquire bilingual are more intelligent compared to students who actually acquire only monolingual. So moving on to the next personality factor, which is age.
Okay, my name is Lunesh and I'll be explaining about the age factor. So there's a biologically determined period of life when language can be acquired more easily, which means that a young learner can acquire a language easily compared to an adult learner. Critical period hypothesis is associated with neuropsychological mechanism where early and late acquired languages are represented in spatially separated parts of the brain known as the Broca's area. So moving on to morphosyntax. Morphosyntax explains the relationship between morphology and also syntax. Morphology meaning the study of structure and syntax meaning the arrangement of words and phrases to form a complete sentences. So major source of difficulty for non-native adult language learners are morphosyntax, where they find it difficult to put it together compared to their first language. For representation and processing of second language words, age of second language acquisition has a major influence on how bilingual represents and access words in their second language. For phonology and accent, phonology of first language and second language is completely different. General characteristics of second language, such as slower speech rate and lower proficiency than native speakers, are from the interaction between non-native speakers' first and second language. Existence of several muscles such as throat, larynx, mouth, lips, tongue, and etc. are used in articulation of human speech. And also a tremendous degree of muscular control is required to achieve the fluency of a native speaker when a non-native speaker acquires a language. For second language learner, they may perceive their own accent as close to their target language, but not exactly as the native speaker, than the accent of other learners due to their frequent exposure to their first language. As for universal grammar, second language learning is theoretically more complicated than first language acquisition, where second language learners are cognitively more matured. So moving on to the third factor.
Me, myself, Valerie. So one of the personality factor, which is self-esteem. Self-esteem is a term used to reflect a person's overall emotional evaluation of his or her own worth, and the degree of self-esteem is hypothesized to be correlated with success in second language acquisition, especially in tasks involving oral performance. And oral production tasks differ from reading and writing tasks by posing a greater potential for damage to damaging one's self-esteem in the process of second language acquisition. So now moving on to inhibition part.
Hello, I am Yogesh. For the inhibition meaning a feeling that prevent us from doing what we like. For example, for many years we are doing certain things, and suddenly there is a pause. That means we are unable to continue doing the thing. And inhibition prevent us from taking risk and discourage language learning. This is meaning when you have the inhibition feelings in yourself, you are scared to take risk, whether because maybe you feel like it's going to end in a failure, or you gonna not gonna face success when taking the risk. This problem often in adolescent learners, because when you are become an adolescent and you have to adapt a new thing, it takes quite a long time for yourself to adapt to the certain certain scenes or certain language. For example, when you are talking in a certain language for quite some years, and suddenly you are required to use the new language, for the adolescent, they for sure they're going to face uh, more problem and take a longer time to adapt to the new situation. Moving on to the risk taking. Risk taking is a character where you have to brave yourself to take the risk to continue or try a new thing that you never tried before. This risk taking is more important characteristic for a successful language learner. If you are brave enough to take the risk, that means you are brave enough to learn a new language. Risk taking also a willing to try out. I mean, a new process. If you if you are brave enough to take the risk, then you are brave enough to willing to try a new process in your life. For example, you if you're a baby, first you start to crawl, then you start to walk. If you don't have the feel of risk taking, you can move on to the next part of your life. And risk taking is most important part in the second language learning users. Moving on to the third point.
So now is anxiety. Anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. It seems clear that high levels of language anxiety are associated with low levels of academic achievement in second or foreign language learning. So anxiety measures that are not directly related to second language anxiety failed to show any correlation with achievement, and anxiety can become an effective filter for learners from entering a learner's cognitive and processing the system. So anxiety also has an impact of quality of communication output. So now moving on to empathy.
Good day to you, madam. My name is John Matthew, and I'll be talking about empathy and how empathy is actually affecting is a factor affecting our language learning and acquiring. It works in two ways, madam. As a motivation for us to learn, number one. Number two is it's a means of understanding another person when we put ourselves in their position. When we make ourselves into a person who actually thinks from another person's point of view. If the other person is a native to another language, they are going to be thinking, how would this person would be thinking as well? So when empathy happens, we talk to ourselves. It's called interpersonal communication. So when you have interpersonal communication inside the self, hence learning happens instinctively, basically, madam. So Empathy helps a lot. As an example, let's say I give you, if let's say I'm looking at a person who is a native to another language, who's going through some hard times, troubles, and everything, and I'm not able to help that person. And I'll be thinking to myself, what would this person actually be thinking to himself? What this person actually is going through. So when I have the interpersonal communication inside myself, it helps my learning because I'm thinking from the other person's point of view. So putting yourself into another person's shoe helps a lot, madam. So moving on to the other, to the next point, which is extraversion and introversion.
Okay, for extravision and introvision, it doesn't have a significant impact on second language acquisition. Extroverts tend to more successful learners than introverts. Why we are saying so? Extravision have more opportunity to practice because they are more friendly and have more wider opportunity to practice or to communicate and or learn from others. They are risk takers. Extravision means they have the tendency to communicate, to learn, to explore more and more just to get what they want. They are more resistant to fossilization. They use more functional strategic. They tend to think and act. They are more tolerance for risk. For example, once they are taking a risk, they will think whether what I'm doing is right or not. They will explore more and more to gain their knowledge, and their main motive is to find out what is the meaning and why they are exploring some things. For introversion, these kind of people more focus on the meaning rather than the strategy. They go for the meaning. Introversion is the people who like less communicate with others. They are risk takers, but not as equal as the extravision. They're more careful with their speech when they communicate with others. When they're doing certain things, they like keep on focus to make sure they didn't do any mistakes any part of the speech. They are self-conscious. When they do something, they focus, make sure they don't fail, make sure they didn't out of topic. That's what we found out the difference between extra vision and introvision. Move on to the next point.
Okay, madam. I'll be talking about instrumental and integrative orientation in terms of motivation, madam. So instrumental motivation and integrative motivation is simple, madam. Instrumental motivation can be something materialistic or physical thing that motivates another person to go an extra mile. Example, when a teacher actually comes to you and tells you, okay, if you finish this syllabus, if you learn this particular thing, or you finish this homework, I'll be giving you this, a pen, or something to actually motivate you. But when you talk about integrative motivation, madam, it's something you feel deep inside yourself. When you think, I should learn this to make myself better, to be a better human being, to make myself and my social skills better. That is integrative, something you feel inside yourself and you feel you want to do it. It's not motivated by anything exterior, but it's all interior. And moving on to the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, madam.
Okay, madam, when we look into intrinsic and also extrinsic motivation, it is like what our friend John Matthew has explained before. Intrinsic meaning it is driven within you. Extrinsic meaning some external force. Okay, when we look, let me give you example for extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation when it comes to acquiring a second language, right? When we talk to our teachers, our parents, our peers, when we acquire, as what I said earlier, when we acquire a language, we don't look at the form, we just look at the meaning. So when we talk to someone, we don't be noticing about the form of language that we are using. We just talk to them so that the other person gets what we mean. We mean like we want to say to them, so that's how they acquire second language. When we talk about intrinsic motivation, it is something which is driven within you. You want to learn the language because you want to meet the global need for the language. So it is, for example, like when you're reading a book, you read the book, it doesn't mean the form is correct or not. You read a book for you to get the meaning from the book, from the language that they are using. So that is actually how you can, how intrinsic and extrinsic motivation can help someone, can help the learner in acquiring a second language. Moving on to the relevance.
All right, madam, to conclude everything, there are a lot of personality factors inside ourselves to actually determine the level of our understanding and how much we acquire in a language. As an example, I give you, madam, extrovert and introvert. The main cliche of people is being an extrovert helps you to acquire language faster because you're an extrovert. You go talk to people and you learn new things. But I personally, and I'm sure everybody knows that there are a lot of introverts we know who actually acquire language better because they are very careful with what they absorb. An extrovert absorbs everything and probably they are not filtering out and I mean they're not filtering out, then they're actually letting things out. But an introvert is different. So there are a lot of things we personally can take it from all these factors to acquire our language, and it's our openness and willingness to learn, madam. Not necessarily you have to be, you need to have empathy inside yourself or need to have anxiety inside yourself to affect your language learning, but our openness and willingness to learn, it's all a factor, but it can't be a major factor. It just helps here and there. It's all comes down to us, and it doesn't matter if you fail or not when it comes to acquiring language. All these factors are just part of it. It's down to us. Being an extrovert and introvert doesn't define on how we actually acquire the language or learning the language. It's how much we want it, madam. That's all from us, madam. Thank you so much. Have a good day.